All right, so my name is Darrel Manis. I'm a graduate student here at Fort Hays State University. I am a painting major here, and also I'm taking a non-traditional printmaking class through Brian Hutchinson this summer. So today we're going to be talking about acrylic polymer transfer. So what that is, basically, is where you take a photocopied image using a toner printer, and you use a medium of some kind to transfer the toner from the paper to the polymer, and you have that polymer on a surface, which will be the work of art that you're creating. So I use this a lot in a lot of my mixed media works. So I have a couple of paintings that I did last semester in my painting class with Ji Huang. We have a couple of these pieces here in the series. Each of these black and white images are a polymer transfer that I painted on to a wood panel. So I did the acrylic painting and then created the polymer transfer, applied the transfer, let it dry, and removed the paper from the backing and left these toner transfers onto the surface. So I did a little bit of that as well for my class for some mixed media prints that I've been working on with Brian in his class. So we have a couple of different examples of some transfers. So this one here is a partial polymer transfer. And this one, this really small little spot right here, is another example of a mixed media polymer transfer. So everything that you need to start this process, you're going to need obviously the surface that you're going to be transferring it on. I'm going to be just transferring it onto some really nice, like thick watercolor paper that I stole from Brian that he doesn't know about yet. And I have toner transferred this image of a hand onto this surface. You'll need the piece that you're going to be creating the decal out of. What I did for this, I have this bird that I photocopied from the cover of a magazine that I really liked. I love all of these different colors and the kind of like 3D look to the image. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be applying the polymer to this image, and it is going to transfer to the ground of our surface for the actual piece itself. You're going to need, first off, you have a couple of options that you're going to want to kind of go through based on the finish that you want on the surface. So any of the artist acrylic mediums, the gloss medium or a matte medium, are both really good ways to create this transfer. It has to be an acrylic base and it has to be printed on a toner paper. You get different finishes depending on which type of medium you use. If you use a matte medium, like if you look here on this one, this transfer of this Athenian statue is very much like very matte. When you use a matte medium, it does have a non-gloss to it, but the surface of a lot of these were done with a gloss medium. If you don't have access to like gloss medium, you can use Mod Podge. Mod Podge you can get in a gloss or a matte variant. So either of those work out really well. You're also going to need some kind of a brush for application. You're going to need, depending on how you like to do it, you may want an X-Acto knife and an assortment of brushes. You want a pretty big brush to lay down large areas of your medium and some small brushes to kind of pick out little extra stuff that might pool up. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with the transfer here. I've made some really small markings here. I took and laid this out where I wanted it to go, which I want these here to kind of line up with the end of the paper. And I got these very, very light drawing markings that I made around the outside of the wings of the bird. So I did this so that way I can make sure to lay it where I want to whenever I'm starting the transfer process. So you want to make sure you're really comfortable with where it's going to go, because you really only get one shot at this. Otherwise, if it doesn't quite transfer where you want it to, it's going to be stuck there. So you really want to make sure that you know exactly where it's going to go. So there are kind of two schools of thought when it comes to where you apply the medium. I'm going to be using the matte medium today. And Some people prefer to put the medium on the ground that you're going to be transferring the surface onto. Some people prefer to paint it straight onto the image and then flip it over and put it there. I prefer to paint the medium on in the boundaries of where I'm going to be putting it, because for me, that helps me to make sure that I can kind of like have a little bit of wiggle room to move it into place if I need to, and then I can gently start to like squeeze it out. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to start off with that. We're going to open this up. Sometimes these can get a little crunchy, so just make sure that you kind of open them before you start this. I'm going to look one more time at my placement because, like I said, you get one shot at this. This is 8 Mile and you are M&M. So you want to make sure that you just get any other little marks that you want so you can paint this wherever. I especially want to make sure that I get this in my really small parts because you don't want any like pooling of extra matte medium because that can create like uneven surface. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take our matte medium, we're going to get a nice healthy dose of that, and we're going to start to apply it to our surface. Now, you don't have to be like really precise with this. Also, you probably should put something underneath your paper, but hey, this is Brian's table, not mine. It's fine. I'll clean it up. So we're going to apply this pretty thick. The brush strokes, for the most part, if you don't use a lot of the matte medium or gloss medium, they tend to kind of level out. So you don't have to be really super precise with it because gravity and just everything is going to help to kind of take care of that. And it's really not going to bother your image too much. You can accentuate those brush strokes if you really want to build the medium up and you really want to make sure that that sticks out and you really want to show that texture. You can get really textured with this. The more coats of medium you add and the longer you wait for it to dry between coats, it's going to leave more of that texture. So if that's what you're after, you definitely can do that. If you've seen any of my work, I like to work very smooth. So I prefer to do just a coat or two, and then I like to make sure it's nice and smooth. So we're going to kind of take some of this excess, kind of get some of it off. So take that. You're going to want to clean this brush like ASAP. Absolutely. Because if you leave that on there, it's going to solidify. You'll never be able to clean that brush, and that's the worst thing for any art teacher is destroyed brushes. So we're going to move this away a little bit so we have a clean surface. I'm going to line up with my markings here, and we're going to drop it in, make sure it's right where it needs to go. Then you want to start kind of here in the middle and start to lay it down. So I'm going to get all the way up to where I did put the medium. So lay this down. Now, you have to be very careful when you get to these areas. Like I like to use a brush sometimes to just lay these down, because if you touch here, you might be able to see some of this medium is starting to pool right here at the edge of this feather. When this happens, you have to be super careful, because if you end up letting this like roll over onto the paper that it's transferring from, it's going to create a hard space, and that hard space is not, it's going to hold on to the transfer, but it's also going to hold on to the top of the paper. And if you do that, it's going to end up like ripping apart, and that part of the image will not transfer. So you just have to be real careful when you do that. If you get any of that pooling, you can get rid of it, but that's what these small brushes are for, and we'll get there. So I'm going to just push these out, make sure that I get as much of this medium as I can to the edges. And then we're going to make sure that it's all touching. So there were a few areas that I didn't quite get any medium on. So We're going to use one of our small brushes. We're going to get our X-Acto knife, lift it up a little bit, and we're going to push some of this underneath here. Just enough. This is just if you make a mistake. Like, the main thing is just making sure you get medium everywhere. Like, you don't want to miss any spots, and you want to make sure that everything transfers. So I have a little spot underneath here, and put some medium underneath there. Set that down. You can get some really good quality detail in these if it's a good image, lots of toner. This stuff will pick up really well. So we're going to come underneath there, just tap it down. Remember, we don't want any to get on the top of the paper. I think I got a little section right here. I want to try to shove some medium underneath there as well. Okay. So we'll take that, set it down here. Now for the pooling. So we're going to get our brush, and we're going to make sure that we get our stuff that's starting to pool and just pull it away from the transfer. So we do not want to go back and forth. We want to make sure that that is away from that, because we don't want those hard lumps that are both top paper and toner. It'll rip off part of our image. So we have just a couple more that are popping up around here that I'm going to get rid of, especially here around the wings. Real careful. Okay. And I think that is probably good for today. So there are a lot of different ways that you can get an effect that you want. And a lot of that depends on, like we said earlier, how much medium you use. And also another thing is curing time. So this stuff can dry in less than an hour. I mean, if you're getting really impatient, you can use a blow dryer. There's all kinds of different ways that you can speed up this process. I like to let it go really naturally. For this series, it was at least 8 hours of curing time. And so you can get really nice detail with a good image and lots of curing time. That strengthens the polymer. It makes it to where that whenever you start to get rid of this paper on the back, because you have to wet the paper, and then you have to kind of just start rubbing it until all of the paper is removed and all that's left is the polymer and the toner. If you want it to not, like, if you want a little bit of an effect where the whole thing didn't transfer, you can wait just a little while and it will create an effect. So like this here was just a transfer of like a photocopy of the moon. And what I did was I just took this and laid it out and let it dry for less than an hour. And then I wanted to like get the image out. And so I took like just a wet rag, wet paper towel, and just started to rub at the transfer. And I also did it in this motion to kind of leave these areas. If there's like those brush strokes that we put here in the medium, like if it dries that way and you especially don't give it enough time to cure, those areas won't dry fully. And that's how you can get some of these little like scratches, these kind of like separated areas there in the transfer. But the longer you wait and everything you do there, if you're very patient, you can get some really, really fine detail if you have a good print. So we're probably gonna have to call that for now until we can see what it looks like tomorrow. All right, so we're ready for part 2, which is gonna be the removal of the paper that's gonna reveal the polymer, which is by this time absorbed the toner into it. So to do that, you'll need a wet paper towel or a wet sponge or anything like that, and a dry paper towel or something else dry to help that. So to do this, we just need to gently start to scrub away the top layer of this paper that has dried overnight. So we're going to take this. I like to squeeze just a little bit of water out here first, let the paper absorb that, and then start to scrub away at it. So we printed on top of this watercolor paper, which is going to be really nice and absorbent. So we can already start to see that image come out.
That black ink that I ordered is water miscible too, so this would be something you could totally
So we want to try to gently do this. Rub all this away, dab up any of the spots that came up. So any of these broken areas are areas that either did not get any of the polymer or maybe just dried from like too high of a layer there. But we're going to go ahead and just keep gently doing this. Squeeze the water. And I like to use a circular motion to reveal the image underneath. So the longer that you let this set, the more that acrylic polymer is going to absorb all of that toner and is really going to give nice, bright values. All of that color is going to show through. You can do this in black and white too. It doesn't have to be just color. Anything that you print off with the toner printer will work. Wipe away all of this excess as we go. Okay, so the majority of the paper is off. Now, as this dries, your image might start to get a little fuzzy, a little hazy looking, and what that is just residual paper that wasn't scrubbed well enough. And what you can do is you can just let that dry. You can dry it with a hair dryer, or you can just let it set, and then after a while you can come back, wet it again, scrub at it gently, and the rest of that paper will disappear after a few more applications of water and a little bit of force. So after that, cool thing about this is since it's an acrylic medium, you can paint over it. You can do all kinds of different stuff to alter the image. You can draw back over the top of it. It can be a really versatile way to be able to transfer an image instead of just drawing it onto your paper. So just another tool to have in your toolbox.